Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Today is going to be probably my most important interview that I'm going to post on my channel, and you're going to find out why just in a second. With me, I have Mike Collins, the founder of SugarAddiction.com and the sugar-free man who has been sugar-free for how many years now?
33.
Amazing. You have raised also sugar-free babies from the womb, no sugar up until they were 6 years of age. And then
Yeah.
after that, it was what, just once a month, maybe?
You're never at home, just always,
Yeah.
outside
And
birthday parties.
fantastic. You get it. You understand food addiction. You understand sugar addiction. And I should say we have an update. You have recently converted to a carnivore diet. I'm so excited about that. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that too. But first, can you share a little bit with our audience, um, just a little background and what eventually led you to understand the sugar addiction and what you're doing now with it, with the website and the program, the sobriety meetings, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's I got a podcast version. It's probably, like I said, it brings up more questions than it answers, but it really did start a generation ago with my mom, who was my favorite sugar junkie. Honestly, she her mother died when she was just 8 years old, and when you look at it, they had to move in. My grandfather and her had to move in with his sister. They had a big, they owned like this Four Corners, and they owned the convenience store across the way. It was basically a general store then. And my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim that anytime my mom walked into that store, she could have anything she wanted and just put it on his tab. Well, a wonderful thing to do for an 8-year-old girl who just lost her mother. It really cemented into my mother that sugar was love. And that literally is how I grew up. I mean, she didn't know the difference. Like, to her, giving us sugar was love and helping us, helping love us, really kind of wild. And so I was just covered up with sugar. I mean, it was just insane how the amount of sugar that we had, full unfettered access to the sugar bowl. I mean, no, they didn't even didn't say a word, never a word in our whole life. I have that sugar bowl from the estate. It's like, just put as much on your cornflakes and sugar, you could scrape off like a half an inch with the milk at the end. And Kool-Aid with like 3 times the recipe. We could just make it, right? We used to eat bread and butter and sugar sandwiches, like when there was not any food around. So, fast forward, I, I, I ran into beer. Now, I didn't realize the sugar was changing how I felt. I didn't realize it. I just liked it. I mean, the science now knows that it was changing how I felt, made me feel good. It was hitting my dopamine receptors. But I didn't begin to realize what substances did to me until I got to, 13, 14, ran into beer. And I knew that changed my state. Like, I was kind of shy, and I could talk to the girls, drink the beer behind the high school, right? And so, liquid courage, we used to call it back then. Anyway, fast forward to 28, I got sober. And we can talk about that. I'm kind of an open book about that. We're actually going to be doing a summit on it soon. But I went right back to sugar. I got sober, as do many recovering people. Like, I just started and I didn't really use sugar when I was drinking or doing drugs. And so I ended up adult acne, bleeding gums. It was a nightmare. I mean, the only thing I wanted when I quit drinking was not to look like my grandfather with the big red nose, And I had the rosacea. I mean, it was really bad. And so um, I started to look at it. I started to read about it and ran across a book called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues was written by a guy named William Duffy, who married Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And they promoted that book pretty heavily in the 70s and 80s. And so I it just hit my head. I just got in my head, and I just quit the sugar slowly. It took me a year to quit sugar. First, I quit caffeine because that was giving me anxiety, because I used to drink 8 16-ounce Mountain Dews a day.
Wow.
Deposit, yeah, like the deposit bottles. so that I didn't have to pay as much. And I literally, they called me the Mountain Dew man. Every morning I go get my other 8-pack or whatever. Um, and it was, the anxiety was killing me. So I quit the caffeine, then the sugar, then the flour. But that took 3 years, like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I was just kept like trying to quit, trying to quit. And
Mm.
so when I finally got off it, I ended up marrying a woman who was also in recovery. And somehow at that time, I talked her into, when she got pregnant, like no flour, no sugar, no caffeine in the womb. Oh, and then it lasted till they were 6 years. The boys were 6 years old. So they had a very unique childhood, to say the least. They never had sugar in the home, but when they went to outside birthday parties after that, they had a little.
Mhm.
And they always said, Dad, write a book, write a book, write a book. Stop talking about it. We don't want to hear about it anymore. And so I did. And that was 2018. And I bought Sugar Addiction like 2009 or 8 or something like that. And I was working at the time, working regular kind of life and career and stuff. And I put out really, really good information. I mean, seriously good information, best on at that time. But I wasn't coaching. I didn't have groups or anything like that. It wasn't until I was kind of semi-retired that I started coaching online and started growing these groups. And that's when it really took off about 6 or 7 years ago, something like that, 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm.
And now it's just, 40,000 people in the community, and it's huge Facebook groups, all this kind of stuff where what we found and what I found over the years of coaching and stuff is this truly is a substance use disorder. This is an addiction. This is not a diet. It has nothing to do with diet, exercise, nutrition, nothing. It has to do with emotional wellness. It has to do with, and comfort food is called comfort food for a reason. And it's a big joke, and empty calories are a big joke. But now the science, and I've been doing these summits for, it's been 7 years, but we've done 10 events because we started doing them twice a year. And I've literally been able to watch the science around sugar addiction, sugar in general, sugar in the body explode, sugar in the brain, sugar in the emotions, explode in the last 3 to 5 years. And just not anyone really knows about it. These wonderful scientists have been languishing in anonymity for in their labs. One of my guys here in LA, he's got $50 million in funding for childhood obesity, and no one ever knows, doesn't even know about the guy. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
What's
He
his
finally
name?
wrote Michael Gorin. He finally wrote a book called Sugar Proof.
Okay.
It's really good.
Gotta get him on for
Yeah, no, you'd enjoy Michael, and he has a co-author, Elizabeth, I think, I forget her name,
okay.
but yeah, so the Robert Lustigs and the Chris Palmers and the people with the brain stuff and the Richard Johnsons on fructose, and it just goes on, and their research is impeccable. They're very famous, and I've been blessed to be able to see all this and put it all together, and every day I do it, I know more and more that this is, substance use disorder is the non and destigmatized term for addiction. All of the government websites have been changed to substance use disorder, addiction, addict, junkie. These are not words people use anymore. And so, this truly is a substance use disorder.
Mm.
And folks need to understand that it has more to do with their emotions than their stomach or their diet or their exercise or even the food they're eating at some level, as long as they're not eating ultra processed carbs. So anyway, that's this podcast version. If it usually brings up more questions than answers, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how I got here.
Before we dive into just how addictive sugar is, you were able to eventually, after a 6 month of trying to cut off caffeine, you were able to be done with that, and then flour, and then sugar. I don't know if it was in that order. And then after that, you kept some grains and you kept some fruits, right? And then eventually you had to cut those out too, right?
Great, you're right. I missed that part of the question. So, or the part of the story is about 7 years ago. I was the chairman of the Food Addiction Institute, and one of the board members, Cynthia, um, started talking to me about, and Cynthia I respected more than a lot, I shouldn't say it that way, but more than a few people over there. And because she'd been sober for 50 years and sugar, flour, and grain free for 25. And so again, like the carnivore stuff, I mean, it was an experiment to me. It was like I use my own children for a guinea pig. I'm fine with using myself as a guinea pig. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and at that time, I had the adult acne. My gums had bled my whole life. I had these basal cells, like diagnosed from a doctor, and and so I quit grains. I quit fruit. I quit fruit juice. I quit dried fruit. And honestly, I quit vegetarianism and veganism, that kind of thing, and started eating animal products. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you my gums stopped bleeding. My gums had bled since a childhood. I thought that's what gums did when you brush them, right? They stopped bleeding. I haven't had a pimple in 5 or 7 years, and so the outside inflammation changed. So now I'm thinking to myself, what was going on inside my body, inflammation wise, right?
Mm.
So yeah, that was definitely an important part of the story that I left out. Good catch on that one.
And now you're trying to see what would happen if you take out the veggies, because the last podcast you ever gave, you probably still were having vegetables, because I watched all your podcasts. So what
I'm
has
humbled.
changed?
Humbled.
They're
No,
great.
yeah, no, it is true. My new experiment is I used to call my diet green keto or like high green keto or something because I would eat just greens and animal products, right? Eggs, cheese. I try and stay away from cheese now, but it's still a hard one. Um, and then I went right straight to beef, you know what I mean? And so I dropped the veggies, and now it's like beef, salt, and water kind of thing. And I'm just, I feel better than I felt in a long, long time. I tell this story like when I was in my 40s, I used to work out with the biggest and the baddest gym owners and guys. And they're like, Collins, how come you can't gain any weight? You're strong. And they're like, how come you don't gain any muscle, like mass? And here I am in my 60s, and I'm like getting ripped, not want to say ripped, but and I'm not gaining a lot of weight, but there's a lot of definition happening, and I'm not even working out that hard. It's been
Interesting.
amazing. It's just been amazing. You know what I mean? The change, you
That's
know,
what I always say. Yeah, like a carnivore diet is not just a weight loss diet, it's a weight normalization diet. If
yeah,
you were underweight, it helps you put on muscle. If you're overweight, it regulates it and you shed the excess body fat. And you
yeah,
can lift weights. People always ask me, well, can you be an athlete and also do carnivores? Absolutely. It's just there's a small adaptation period that first 3 months that you start dropping a little bit in your performance, and it takes 3 months for your performance to go back up to where it was before you made the switch, and then eventually you're gonna go beyond that. And that actually even happens with keto, so you've already done that adaptation phase. um
yep,
so, and now without the plants taking room in your gut, you have more room for protein, high quality protein and bioavailable nutrients from animal food. So I'm so excited to hear that.
yeah. It's been interesting. I mean, I've always loved the experiment part. I mean, it almost doesn't matter what I'm doing, but obviously I want to optimize performance of every kind. And I think, to be honest with you, I call it carnivore zen or whatever. When I did drop um, the grains, and even to a slight amount, no, actually not even that slight. When I dropped the greens, it's almost like you can't project forward. You can't worry backwards. It really does bring you to more of a presence. And I do believe it has to do with the activation of the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine that plants, even greens, have been hybridized for so many years to take the bitterness out. They're all like an extension of these one group of plants. And broccoli and kale, the greens, Brussels sprouts have huge amounts of fructose in them. And I would eat 2 pounds of Brussels sprouts. So I was really feeding my drip of fructose, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, I'm on like a fructose zero diet right now.
I love
Like
it.
I just have to find out. I just interviewed Richard Johnson, who's like, I believe the most famous, Dr. Lustig's pretty famous, but like I think Richard's deeper into the understanding of fructose. He's actually working on a drug that when it blocks the fructose pathway, he can help block alcoholism. It's wild. And so the fructose zero part of it for me is an experiment in the psychoactive nature of fructose, not necessarily carnivore even, which is important. But it's more on the idea that if I eliminate, well, I'll tell you a true story. So I always hate dating myself, but I became a grandfather a week ago Saturday. Okay.
Oh my God, congratulations.
Yeah. And it's like, and there was a lot of emotions going around. I wasn't there. They're in Chicago, and I was divorced, and there was just a lot of emotions about them, my kid growing up, and now having a baby, that kind of thing. I was thinking, so here I am on fructose zero for about a month, and I I had to get this like I don't know why, but got this bag of pistachios, right? And it was just literally, I felt wonderful for a couple of hours. And I paid for that bag of pistachios for 2 days, mentally, emotionally, and physically, digestionally, let's put it that way. And it's like I just got more strength around the idea that I have healed from the effects of fructose in my body. Like
Mm,
there's no human bodily function required that requires fructose, right? And
no.
so at the end of the day, like we were supposed to get fructose once or twice a year when things were ripe. And those are those nasty crab apples, those little tiny wild berries, and maybe a little honey if you wanted to get risk stung by a bee, right?
Right.
And so I just love, the idea of the fructose zero experiment, like I said, is important as the carnivore experiment, if that makes sense.
I love it. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Another thing also is that when you're eating those plant foods, they have lectins in them. And we have very clear data. There's literal pictures under a microscope of a lectin on top of the vagus nerve, traveling up the vagus nerve, which is a major highway, a nerve connecting our gut to our brain.
Right.
And not only that, but also on top of our dopamine neurons. So what happens is that when you eat those plant foods, you get the lectins, they travel via the vagus nerve up into your dopamine producing cells, and they start destroying your ability to make dopamine. And this is why sometimes people, they will literally have full-blown depression because they are reacting to some lectin in some plant food, you know?
Yeah. So
So,
get this, this will really throw you.
mm,
So, like I said, I was talking to Dr. Johnson a couple of days ago on an interview, and he said the body he realized they realized less than 5 or 7 years ago that the body produces fructose, and here's how it produces it: high carbohydrates and salt. So French fries, right? That's what I used to, when he talks, I'm like,
wow.
it's like so French fries are like the perfect drug, the perfect food, if you will, to create fructose in the body. I mean,
Whoa.
right? I mean, it's like when you start to dig deeper into the science, you start to understand this kind of deep level. I call it evolutionary theory. And it's really truly understanding the evolution. But I like to stay in my lane and try and understand the addictive nature of the food products that we eat, right?
Mm,
And I believe once you heal up from the ultra process, and that's truly what it is, healing up body and brain, then the what people think are natural, the sugars, the fruits, the fructose, start to bother you, right? The lectins start to bother you. The oxalates start to bother you because, here I am, a guy that hasn't had sugar, flour, or caffeine in many years, and then started to heal from that stuff. And then I've healed another, I believe, healed another level to the point where now, um, I'm not supposed to be eating a lot of fructose or a lot of lectins or a lot of oxalates because it causes inflammation, body and brain.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you about the timeline of what should people expect once they cut out all sugars, all grains, and caffeine and fruit, and we should add dairy because dairy could be actually before we dive into the timeline. This is an important one, right? Why is it that dairy can be problematic with food addiction? Because I know a lot of carnivores love their cheese.
Yeah. Well, it's what is it, galactose? I mean, there still is sugar and doesn't have fructose in it, but there still is sugar. And there's a lot of proof that even fake sweeteners of all kinds, if the brain gets
Right.
sweet, it's like wired together, fired together. It starts to look for the high test, the real stuff, and you get the cravings. Here's the thing that I think is one of the most important messages is who the hell wants to do any of this if you always wrestle with cravings, right? If you don't come to peace with it, like even when I was doing fruits and grains and stuff, I never had any cravings for flour, sugar, or caffeine. It wasn't
Mm,
like I had cravings, so it didn't really bother me. I didn't really even realize it.
right.
And so the dairy will create craving. And if it doesn't, then that's wonderful,
Yeah.
right? Then you can have your hard cheeses and what have you.
Yeah. I just feel like if as a food addict, you're probably gonna get cravings from eating dairy, right? Because
Yeah.
it actually activates our opioid receptors. So it is designed to make animals get addicted to it so they would have it, as their only form of nourishment.
One thing that I think that cheese lovers, carnivore cheese lovers can look out for is, I guess I don't really have a name for it, but what we could call morning hunger, right? And so what I notice is that when I have a cheese at night, that my stomach is like growling. One of the things that I like try and tell people is that a growling stomach is not a real food response. It's a drug withdrawal response, right? It's not like you're hungry. Hunger is experienced, you will find hunger is experienced differently. And when I eat cheese, I have that little rumble that I'm hungry, right? If I don't eat it, then I don't even think about food till 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
I can't
And so,
believe you just said that because I was telling you before we started that yesterday was the only day I had dairy, and I woke up today. I was teaching at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was planning on having one ribeye, one meal a day today, and I'm good. And I've
yeah.
been doing that, no problem. And around 10 a.m., I'm starting to teach, and I could hear my stomach rumbling, and I'm like, wow, I wonder why I'm extra hungry today. I didn't make the link.
The growling stomach is absolutely a sugar withdrawal symptom. It has nothing to do with you're hungry, nothing at all. You're not hungry. Well, I mean, you might be still, but you're really, it's just a sugar withdrawal feeling. And people that really quit sugar, they don't believe me. I mean, I'm like everybody else. You could hear my stomach from across the table if I was back in the day, but I don't, my stomach doesn't growl anymore, except when I know what I'm doing, like cheese or whatever.
Right.
So people have to really understand that that's a different signal. This is a different body signal. It has nothing to do with hunger. So
Fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline because basically how long does it take for the cravings to subside? Because I think when people start to go on a carnivore diet or try to cut out the sugar, they feel so horrific in the initial stages and so then they just give up and it's like I can't do this forever. I can't live like that every day.
that's a broad question, a very broad question. Like a lot of people call what you're describing this keto flu, right? But the keto flu is really just sugar, ultra processed carb addiction withdrawals. That's all it is. And it can last a really long time, especially heavy caffeine addicts. Okay. We have a caffeine group, and there's, if you read the research on caffeine, it can literally be a post-acute, it's PAWS, called PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, can last up to 6 or 8 months of depression and anxiety and stuff, not while you heal. Like it's literally a minor amphetamine, okay? And amphetamine recovery is one of the longest and hardest there is. So let's set that aside for a little bit. And one of the things that, and I'm going to say it even on your podcast, because one of the things that pisses me off about the carnivore community is this caffeine crap. You know, some of the biggest of the big are talking about meat, salt, water, and coffee. And I'm like, enough already. That is hurting people, I believe. It's not right. It's like, it is a powerful psychoactive that people are addicted to, and it's, you know, destroying their anxiety, their depression, whatever. So let's set that aside for a minute. But if you talk about the sugar and flour stuff, you have to remember that you've been doing this likely since the womb, okay? A powerful psychoactive enough to stimulate your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, adrenals, oxytocin, cannabinoid receptors all over your body, and you're in a flux, you're in a mess, and you have to let this heal. And the most important part of it is that you're not healing, you're healing inflammation in the body, sure, but what you're really healing is you have to go through the process, almost like getting off of psychotropic meds for depression. You have been self-medicating for decades. And what's going to happen is when you stop this self-medication process, your everyday stressors, your old trauma, small t, large t, doesn't have to be sexual abuse or physical abuse. These things are going to start resurfacing, okay? These things are going to start being literally, viscerally felt through your body, okay? It's, you know, it's up in the air as to whether or not you have to, what's been tamped down and pushed into your, you know, your psyche, your muscles, your body. The famous book, The Body Keeps the Score, is really about this process of your emotions resurfacing and having to literally feel them out through your body. And without help, without understanding what you're going through, most people turn back. Like, because you literally feel, in some most common refrain is, I'm losing my mind, Mike. I'm losing my mind. And you're not losing your mind. You're coming to your senses, okay? You're coming back to your senses. And so you have to realize that this is, depending on your habit, depending on how your early childhood trauma, your regular, you know, whatever, you are going to have some emotional work to do after you, as you let go of these things, okay? Sometimes it's small. How you deal with your kids, your boss, your significant other, whatever, is going to be different. You can't just go check out for a half an hour and have ice cream. You just, it's not going to work. You're not doing it anymore, right? You're theoretically doing it for your weight or your health, but most people don't put these two things together, right? They don't put the understanding of the emotional ramifications of dropping ultra-processed carbs from their diet. They just don't. And then when it hits them, they turn back. And it's not like I'm going to go get a beer or I'm going to go snort a line of cocaine. It's just like, oh, it's only a soda. Oh, it's only a candy bar. And they feel that relief, consciously or unconscious. Once you get far enough into the process, you know exactly what you're doing. In other words, you are actually self-medicating with the sugar, right?
Yeah.
But in the early days, and for 99% of the population, they don't even know this is happening to them. And so they end up re-ingesting, and they don't have a support group. They don't have a guide to do it. They end up just going back to their normal diet. And they just think that's what it was, you know? So it's hard. And I have to keep pounding this drum to let people understand it, because we've worked with tens of thousands of people now. We have thousands of written success stories. And if there's a key, if there's a clue, it's in their emotions, not in their food.
And this is where the support group helps, and joining a tribe that understands that. And I want to make sure you mention that towards the end so that people know where to find you and where to join those support groups where you hold them twice a day, every single day. And the goal is to hit every hour, right? 24/7, having
Yep.
a support
Yep.
group every hour of the day, which is so
Right.
amazing. So the timeline that you've mentioned before in previous interviews, the first 30 days is probably the hardest, but ideally you want to hit 90 days. And then after you're 90 days abstinent, you still want to, it gets better, but then there's something called the pink cloud. So can you just do that little timeline for us?
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's not as bad as I'm describing, not as far, I mean, I want to, hammer home the idea that this is real. It's not in your imagination. But for a lot of folks, after I call it give me 90, right? Buy into Mikey's little fantasy for 90 days. And, 30, 60, 90 days in, you end up feeling a lot better physically right away. Okay. This can happen at day 20, 30, 40, whatever. And we call it a pink cloud because you're feeling so good. You didn't realize you could feel so good. And then you get overconfident. Okay. You get like, oh, I can handle this now. I can handle a little bit of something, something. And addicts are broken down from my work at the Food Addiction Institute, the people that have been doing this for decades, into three categories. The first category is stone cold hardcore addicts, people who biochemically cannot ingest this product without setting up cravings for more. And they have to go 100% abstinent. Okay. And then the second group is harmful users. These numbers track with the obesity numbers. Now, that said, you can be a very thin sugar addict, but they do track with the obesity numbers, about a third and a third and a third. And so the second group of harmful users, these are folks that maybe biochemically they could once or twice a year or, on a schedule that they discern, they could have sugar. But because of the food system, they've gained a pound or two over 20 years since high school, and now they're overweight and they can just get it under control, right? They become aware of what the sugar is doing, and they're not hardcore addicts. And then the last group is a group of people that are normal. They're normies. We all hate them. No, just kidding.
Just a little bit.
It's like the folks who can like have one cookie or half a cookie and just leave it there. And you're like, wait a minute. Like having like someone that can drink half a glass of wine and not have an alcohol problem, same type of person, right? And those folks they're normies, right?
Right.
And also, like I said, you can be a very thin sugar addict. This is not related to body size. We have ultra marathoners, an Olympic athlete. These people could do anything with their bodies, still can, but they couldn't quit sugar. And so, and their brain was starting to, get in trouble. So yeah, I mean, the addictive nature is very biodiverse, and everyone's a little bit different, but it's the same trajectory. You're still affecting your nucleus accumbens, your brain reward system, your processing stuff. And so that's where I struggle, or that's where I try to get people to understand about their emotions and their brains, not necessarily their fat loss or their muscles or their diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And since you mentioned the brain part too, so important that we understand, like you mentioned, the nucleus accumbens, it's a part of the basal ganglia. It's where, dopamine is produced mainly. And that's like the addiction hub, if you want. And as addiction progresses, its connections to your prefrontal cortex, which is this part right behind your forehead that deals
Right.
with willpower, the connections actually break down. And so it's not just your willpower, by the way, the prefrontal cortex is also your executive function and your ability to make a sane decision. So you think you're making a sane decision, but you're really not, because you no longer have those connections that are strong and solid. And so the addiction takes over, and it takes time for these to heal and for the connections to go back and repair themselves.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That is 110% right. I have gotten stronger over the years, and if somebody calls me for coaching, I tell them, they describe their habit or their weight or whatever. And I say to them, you are literally not in a mental state to make a sound decision about the future of your health. And, some people listen, some people don't, but that's, I believe, a true statement, that they literally are not in that position because they're calling diabetes, or, Alzheimer's diabetes 3, right? And so the science, and Chris Palmer and all these other guys, the science around the brain and sugar has been exploding in the last 3 years, even less, and people just don't understand that that's the important part. That's the leading the ship, right? The brain's leading the ship on your body, whatever. So yeah, I just, you couldn't be more right. And people miss that part. They're so worried. Everybody that comes to me wants to lose weight, 95% of them, right? They think that's the issue. And it is a lot, but we got a saying, come for the vanity, stay for the sanity, right? Because you start to get calmer. You start to remember better. We do surveys all the time, right? And we thought that weight loss would be number one as the best benefit, but it's really the brain. It's like processing better, remembering better, focusing more longer. And that's a great benefit, and less anxiety,
Love it. Yeah. You said something once on a podcast, and I'm trying to recreate it, but I want to see if you can recreate it. You said once, focusing on the weight loss will, like you lose the abstinence if you focus on the weight loss, but if you focus on abstinence, you get the weight loss. I don't know, am I saying
Got
that?
it right. Focus on weight loss, you'll lose your abstinence. Focus on abstinence, you'll lose the weight.
Love it. Just wanted it in my interview. Wanted it there.
Sugar, like that, or and here's the difficult part. Okay, it's like people think for some reason that 100% abstinence from sugar is impossible and not realistic, right? But when you really have experimented with it back and forth and tried, everybody comes back with the same conclusion, that 100% abstinence is 100 times easier than like just a little, right?
Right.
And look, this is not, I don't want to sound fanatical or anything. You do not have, main question, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? Like, is that something, you know what I mean? They can't envision never having a wedding or a birthday party or whatever, no sugar. And I say, maybe, but you only have to do it one day at a time for now. I call it a scratch test, right? Scratch test is simple. Like if you went to the doctor for dust or pollen or ragweed or some kind of allergy, they give you that little scratch test on your arm, put a Band-Aid over it to see that it, inflames. Our scratch test is 0 ultra processed carbs for 30, 60, or 90 days. You reset your body. If I get 90 days out of somebody, almost with 100% success rate, they do not go back. Their skin is better. They're losing weight. Their brain is better. The anxiety is less. I try and get people, I call them tweakers, not like the amphetamine tweakers, but like somebody just wants to tweak their body a little bit. They've already done 100 diets, literally 7.9 different diets is the average of our folks when we do a survey, right? You've done 8 diets, and you've read stuff, you've bought stuff and crap, and just try 90 days with no ultra processed carbs and see what happens. But I want to warn you, what we've been talking about the whole podcast is that there will be emotional ramifications. There will be something that changes in that. And without somebody who's traveled that road before, you're going to feel like you're losing your mind. You're going to feel worried, fearful, anxiety. A lot of people are just crying for no good reason. Like they're just sad. And when they put it all together, genius really is only pattern recognition, right? And we've seen this pattern over and over and over and over. Like we see it so many times that, we now can, walk and guide you through it. So I just I want folks to get away from the weight loss thought. I want them to, yeah, they're going to get healthy. I want them to get to I'm sure everyone's heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? This is where you ascend to, you get your needs met. People want to self-actualize, right? They do. They want to be the best person. I always say I want to die with my music in me, meaning I don't want my creativity to be going to the grave with me. And what people find is they end up the goals that they wanted to reach, the dreams that they had, if they're people who are achievers or want to do something with their life, I always, and I still believe this, and I think it's not recognized enough, is that sugar is an amotivational drug like marijuana, right? It affects the cannabinoid receptors. It affects so much of your brain that you can't go to the gym because you can't get up off the couch. You've learned to hack 10 million, 7 million years of evolution to chase food and sex to procreate the species by sitting on the couch eating Oreos. You can get the same feeling, the same dopamine, serotonin. You can get the same rush, right? The same feeling, and you don't have to move. That's powerful. The body's powerful. We all know that. So anyway, I get off on a soapbox. I didn't mean to, but you understand what I'm saying? Folks are not, they're not seeing the forest for the trees, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And they're in denial too, in a way, because how can somebody like me, for example, do my dissertation on addiction, do every drug, no, not there yet, no, do every diet under the sun, and just the sheer amount of work that I put into trying to always stay fit and lose weight, and it's like I am just trying to like delay having to do what is necessary, which is cut that attachment
Right.
to sugar and food in general, you know?
Right. Well, denial is a symptom of addiction. One, I'm not really, cravings and denial. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not to the either scientific or even internal understanding of how they work, or why they work, or why it is so. But you've all seen the alcoholic who's, obviously his life's a mess, or the drug addict, and they're like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm good. It's just a little, I drink a little much on the weekend, whatever. And the
Right.
same food addicts and alcohol, they're like, well, I'm not as heavy as Sally, or, whatever. They compare each other, and and again, it's really a protective, an ego protection to keep your dopamine drip alive, I guess the best way to put it. That's the only thing I can come up with. But genuinely, cravings or a need to re-ingest and denial are symptoms of the disease of addiction. And sometimes I call it pattern interruption, like Tony Robbins, you got to break the pattern, like hit them upside the head, figuratively, and say, look at this realistically. And some people don't want to listen, or they're not ready. People ask me, what's my business model? I say, I sort for people who are ready. Okay. If they're not ready, it doesn't, all my help, nothing is going to help them. Right. They've got to, in the traditional world of alcohol and drugs or addiction recovery, they call it a bottom. I'm not a fan of bottoms, right? You don't need to have type 2 diabetes and be 100 pounds overweight to change. You can make the decision and change today if you want. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting puzzle, and I like puzzles. So I
Yeah.
like puzzles. So we keep after it a little bit. So we keep going.
And you work with a lot of people one-on-one. It's a little bit more of an exclusive coaching program. Not that it's exclusive, but it's, it requires a
It's
decent
a little
investment.
more money. Yeah, we have now 12 or 13 coaches, and I don't do any more. I do a few people, but it's pretty prohibitive for most people. But the coaches that I have that are trained definitely work one-on-one with folks, and it's a good. Some people need that. They want that. They're used to paying trainers or therapists. Here's one of the things about therapists that I found interesting, and we have therapists who are actually our coaches. They're people go to talk therapy about their weight loss and food issues and whatever for decades. And they unwind it all at the 7-Eleven after the session, right? And so I've come to say, like, talk therapy plus sugar equals zero net gain. You're not getting anywhere, right? We've had so many people with so many years of therapy come in, get off sugar, and some of them go back to therapy to work through some of the issues, but really it wasn't the therapy that was helping them. It never helped them get off the sugar. It was getting off the sugar help them move forward in their life, right? It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg thing. And so, yeah, it's only seeing the over and over and over and over with people attempting this. Again, people come thinking they want to lose weight, but then they get all of these other personal growth benefits.
Yeah, yeah, because now you actually have to do the emotional work that you put off for years and
Right.
years when you could just numb down your feelings with drugs, really. And the
Yeah.
more I look into the research, the more I'm convinced sugar is not only a hard drug, it is a harder drug than the hard drugs. Because if you look at just the rat studies, I remember when I was working on my dissertation, I had to really dive deep into that, and so I would be citing all of the rat studies that showed that rodents preferred sweetened water, or whether artificially or regularly sweetened water, they preferred it much more than cocaine, even at high doses of cocaine. Well, now
Yep.
recently, I remember looking at the 2017 studies. There are more studies coming up showing how the same thing is true with heroin. Rats prefer
Yep.
saccharin, that sweet taste, by a large margin over heroin. And that's just pure sugar. We're not only eating pure sugar, we're eating things that are more addictive than pure white sugar. It's a combination of high fat, high sugar, and sometimes we'll add the chocolate. And we know chocolate can be psychoactive for reasons that we still don't fully comprehend. And so now you have this bomb foods everywhere, and we're only thinking, oh yeah, sugar is yeah. Did you hear about sugar being more addictive than cocaine and
Right.
heroin? It's like, no, it's more addictive than both, because we're not eating pure white sugar. We're
Yeah.
eating worse foods. So,
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's absolutely the gateway drug. It's absolutely, this is an unconscious uh, process that people end up walking through. I literally just got off the interview with Nicole Lavina, and she's like, it said it succinctly. She's neuroscientist, Princeton, the whole nine, and she's like, you're using the sugar to, comfort yourself, self-medicate. Then it stops working. Maybe you have a little nicotine or some caffeine or whatever, and you get to be 13 or 14. You're like finding the beer, finding the pot. You're continuing to. In the case of sugar, it's unconscious that you are comforting yourself emotionally. It's literally because it's ubiquitous and free. Even a child can score it. Yes, a definitively druggy term, but they can score sugars like just regularly during the day. They don't, no one, literally no one, parents included, think about that they are self-medicating the divorce, they're self-medicating the, what's going on in school, they're whatever. But when you get to the alcohol or the pot at 13 or 14 or 15 or whatever, you start to realize that you are doing it. Actually, some people don't. They just think it's a big party, right? They don't understand. I mean, I did back then.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely the gateway drug to soothe emotional pain, right? And
right,
this is the untold story of this epidemic, of this obesity crisis. This is the untold piece of the puzzle that no one, and look, I always use this kind of an amalgam of all of my recovery stories. A 200-pound woman or a 300-pound woman who falls to a right-sized body for her, whatever that is, whatever nature or God, whatever your belief system believed that she was supposed to have, whatever it is, one 120 to 150, she falls to a body that she's happy with, that functions well, because she went abstinent of flour and sugar. She does not talk about the food. She does not talk about the diet. She does not talk about the exercise. When she talks about her story, the emotional recovery she had to go through. This is 90% of us, 90% of the people who had success, right?
Mm.
And so this avatar, they call it in the internet world, this combination of all of the folks who have success talk about their emotional recovery, not their food recovery or their exercise recovery. And that is a clue that maybe people are looking in the wrong place. $78 billion a year. Founded a new statistic. The $78 billion a year diet industry is enough to feed the entire underserved world every year. So it's just ridiculous that, and a lot of it's spent in the United States, to try and do pills and books and courses and this, that, and exercise that to lose weight, when in reality, it all centers around their emotional development and the ultra processed carbs they're eating, right? It's kind of crazy, really. And
what are the traits, or what are the things that you see come up with the ones who succeed?
They want to be better.
We don't have a lot of time, right? You only have, I think, what, 2 more minutes?
I don't know, whatever else we can, she's on my team. Well, she understands.
Okay.
So the answer to your question, ask the question again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like what are the things that people who are successful are doing differently than the ones who keep relapsing?
It comes back to that denial thing. It comes back to or look, also I'm very empathetic, because it comes back to how hard what they have to process is. If it's major sexual abuse or physical abuse or something, if it's a tough life situation, 80+% of our folks, their spouse is not on board. They're not.
Wow.
Matter of fact, a lot of times it's working against them. Like they don't want to give up their whatever, their sugar, so it's a very difficult process, for those folks. And without the group, without some people that can confirm that what they're doing is the right thing, they fall back into this group of people. I mean, you've heard the phrase, you become the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. This is actually now a proven statistic with weight wise, right? You become the average weight of the 5 people you hang around.
It's so true. So true.
And so, I think the failure comes with, and this is kind of trite, people say this a lot, is the journey is inward. People think it's a trite statement, but this inability to accept reality as it is, and to try and bend it to your desires, and when you're not successful, to comfort yourself with an anxiety reliever that's perfectly legal and available at any corner.
And actively pushed on you. Yeah,
and actively pushed on you, exactly. And so that's like, it's a hard escape. It's like getting out Alcatraz. It's a really hard way in this society to be that different. And we haven't talked about this much, but the social aspect of it is hard. We're tribe animals. We like to do things together, right? And when you begin this process of quitting, you end up as the odd person out, the odd man out. You're different, and you have to explain what you're eating, and you have to explain why you have to say no a lot. And people, that's hard. At the core of all this, I mean, we could do a Tim Ferriss podcast for 2 hours. It's codependency, okay? And a lot of people believe codependency is the relationship you have with others, but in reality, it's the relationship you have with yourself first. And when you can't say no, when it's hard, I'll tell you, a lot of the people that fail are people pleasers, right? They've grown up pleasing others. I mean, it's no secret that myself and all my contemporaries, everyone is a woman pretty much. I mean, all of the people who seek help are women because they're used to pleasing their self last and pleasing everyone else first, their
So
children, their
true.
spouse, their parents. And so, you know, it takes the arc of a podcast of this length to get this entire story out, the entire
Yeah.
part of it out, because anything shorter, I actually say on the 30th day of my challenge, my videos, they get a video every day kind of thing. I tricked you. I tricked you into like recovery. I tricked you into change. You thought it was about food. You thought it was about diet. You thought it was about exercise. You thought it was about whatever. And now they understand and that they have to work with others to get themselves to the year, and if they got a lot more weight to lose or whatever. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a big puzzle. I love the puzzle, and you're very kind to listen to the entire story. A lot of times, I'm on podcasts with keto influencers, and they're only talking about the macros and the and the health and the and they don't delve into this part that you're listening very intently, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have, really just focused my efforts recently because I find while coaching clients, they come to me for weight loss on Carnivore, and some of them want to keep a little bit of artificially sweetened products here and there, just a little bit. And now I just know with 100% accuracy who's gonna succeed in achieving their weight loss goals and who will not, because
Right.
the ones who will keep some, and I was more flexible in the beginning, like, yeah, okay, we can do it. Um, Eventually drop out anyway after around 3 weeks. That's usually the cutoff point. Sometimes they'll
It
soldier
is, right?
on, right? It's so
Yeah.
true.
Your experience is showing. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so now I'm like, listen, you can't take this casually. And I pull up all the studies on sugar being more addictive than heroin, everything, like you can't play around with that. You can't have a little bit of heroin and then expect to be clean the rest of the week and not have cravings and suffer.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, it's wild, really. It's hard because people don't want to give it up, and they're in denial a lot about
that's
that.
the thing. And it's
And they
so
don't want
easy
to
to
be
be in
different.
denial,
They
huh?
don't want to be different. And I get that. They don't want to be different. What's exciting about the groups that we have is that they're not different in that group. They're not different. They're this is what everybody's doing. And
Right.
and look, I mean, I'm really a big fan of mirror neurons and memetics and stuff where most of society is about, it's like 1,000 years ago, you left the tribe, you didn't conform to the people around you, you died. And so this draw to be like the people around you is strong, very innate. And
Yeah.
so if you're with a group of people who are wanting to um, move in the direction of abstinence from sugar and weight loss and brain clarity and all the good stuff, then you do that. You end up wanting to be like that, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah, so
helps.
so that you don't let your guard down eventually, and then if you don't constantly get surrounded by a tribe who really is going through it or trying to get clean and sober, it's very easy to kind of downplay the severity. We forget how intense the cravings, or we forget the gravity of the situation before sometimes, and we get, like you said, overconfident. And so I agree with you, and you've mentioned that in your previous podcast, how it's so important to maintain that at least once a week, a meeting like the ones that you offer. So
Yeah.
since I know I just feel so bad. I don't want to keep you. So why don't you tell everybody how they can find you and how can they join those group meetings and all the good stuff?
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's sugaraddiction.com. It's, the oldest website on the internet about sugar addiction, really. And you can go there and it just says up in the right hand corner, join the challenge or whatever. You can join 30-day challenge. 30 days, I come into your inbox every day and give you a video to walk through And so the hardest part, one of the hardest parts is that first 30 days of withdrawals and, changes in your emotions and stuff. And so I walk you through it. And there's a little tick box if you want to join what's called Detox to Lifestyle, which is getting you from day 31 to 365. And there's more meetings. It's a different flavor of meetings. Don't talk so much about the food. And so you can do that too. But, you don't need to do that. But and you can, if don't, it's less than $100 if you want to do it, but you can grab the book that's there free too, if you want to do that and just read the book first. The Amazon book, we brought it back to the website, give it away for free now. So if you want to check that out, you can do that too.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that I link all of your websites and direct ways to contact you and also your Instagram in the description box below. You should have way more Instagram followers. I think we should do an Instagram
I
live.
got a sad Instagram story. I think one of my outsourcers put something and they whacked our Instagram. We did have a lot bigger one.
Really?
Yeah, something. I can't remember what it was. Well, actually, they wouldn't tell us what it was.
Oh, they just took it down.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we had to start over.
That's the problem with Instagram and YouTube too now. Like the censorship is out of control, and we're all, especially being in the health field, we're all very, very upset about it. And this is why now you're having other social media giant, and not giants just yet, but they're popping up so that there is no censorship there. And YouTube sends a survey every once in a while that check and see our satisfaction, and they're always asking, where else do you think you're gonna start creating content? And I'm always telling them, hey, I want to go to all these other sites. Be careful. Yeah, like come on, we are the experts. You can't censor an expert by some other group who, yeah, like no, they don't know better.
I will give you a little warning. I did get censored. I didn't get whacked, but on Facebook I got censored for the cocaine or sugar is 8 times more powerful than cocaine.
That's
They
science.
said I know, but that I'm just telling you, they really did. They whacked me.
Yeah, it's censorship nowadays, and misinformation simply means follow the money. That's it. It's
Right.
very clear to me now. But
I mean,
anyway,
Mark Hyman even talks about that 8 times.
everybody, I know. Tomorrow, by the way, I'm doing an IG live with Nicole Avina. I mean, I think she's the one who did some of those studies too. So,
Yeah, she is. She started way back with Bart Hobel at Princeton.
Yeah.
Ashley Gerhardt, all them. So
yeah, that's right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Mike, spending it and sharing your wisdom with us. So thank you so much.
it's been wonderful. No, you really, like I said, you are a step above the average carnivore influencer. So
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that's where most of the carnivores are gonna follow suit because they're understanding now. Carnivore, we got excited about it and everything, but you know what? We're still addicted. We can't have honey.
right. I mean, again, we could do it, Tim Ferriss, but the people that are the carnivores that are doing the fruit and honey deal, I don't know about that, man. That's not going to end well, I don't think.
Exactly. It's just that they haven't dealt with addiction. They don't understand it. And so that's why they
They
don't
can't let it go. They can't let their fructose go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
They truly are medicating.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. It was fun, and
I'm so glad to hear
you
that.
should be commended for.
We'll do a round 2 soon enough. I'll hit you up soon and we'll do another one.
All right, sounds great.
Awesome.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have children?
I don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're doing a Kids Summit now, but you need to be on our next Quit Sugar Summit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to.
Let's do it then.
Absolutely. Yay.
Right.
This made my day. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and hit that little notification button so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you for sticking with us, and I'll see you in the next one.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.